The year is 640,000 years ago, and supervolcanoes are just getting warmed up. The Yellowstone supereruption is about to occur in 3 stages over the next few 100,000 years. And if the animals around it have anything to say about it, they might be able to warn us about what's coming. Yellowstone National Park is home to thousands of different species of plants and animals, from bison and bears to coyotes and cutthroat trout. But more than half of them are at risk of disappearing, many due to climate change. So, with an impending volcano to worry about too, we decided to take a closer look at some of Yellowstone's most iconic animals to see how they're holding up and what they could teach us about living near an active supervolcano. First, let's get an idea of what kind of time frame we're looking at here. It turns out that predicting when a supereruption will occur is not easy, since they don't happen all that often, and no 2 supereruptions are alike. So scientists use different methods to try and get a handle on it. For example, they can look at deposits left behind from previous eruptions and compare them to modern-day measurements. This gives them an idea of how long it might take for the pressure to build up again and for another eruption to happen. In the case of Yellowstone, researchers estimate there's about a 1 in 730,000 chance of a supereruption happening in any given year. It might be helpful to think of it this way. You're about 20 times more likely to die from a lightning strike. So while scientists do expect another supereruption eventually, they don't know exactly when it will happen. But based on previous eruptions, they think it will likely come in 3 stages. Stage 1 would involve magma rising from deep within the Earth and creating a magma chamber beneath the existing caldera. Stage 2 would involve that magma chamber growing and the land rising as much as 100 feet or 30 meters. Stage 3 would be the actual eruption, which could release between 1,000 and 5,000 cubic kilometers of ash and pumice into the atmosphere. That's enough material to cover the entire state of Montana in 6 inches or 15 centimeters of ash. In other words, the upcoming Yellowstone eruption will be really big. But how will the animals fare? Well, the first stage may not affect them that much. Magma chambers tend to form slowly and far from the surface, so there won't be any major seismic activity or volcanic gases released. That means animals probably wouldn't abandon the area. They'd probably continue on mostly as normal, unaware that their habitat is about to change drastically. Stage 2, however, could be where things start to go awry. As the magma chamber gets bigger, the ground will start to rise, with it causing earthquakes and releasing more sulfur dioxide gas. Plants sensitive to this gas could die, altering habitats and food sources for animals in the park. And if it continues to rise, parts of Yellowstone could even become uninhabitable for some species. All of this could force animals to move away, but some may stay put, potentially putting them at risk. Stage 3, the eruption itself, would devastate the park. Most animals would likely try to flee the enormous amount of ash and pumice raining down on Yellowstone, but some species would be driven to extinction. In fact, it might take decades for animals to return to the park as their habitats recover. But what if some did stick around? They might face food shortages and other challenges, but they'd also have plenty of new habitat created by the eruption. There are lots of species that could make a comeback after the eruption, but let's focus on 4 in particular to see what they might teach us. Amphibians like frogs and toads are especially vulnerable to environmental changes because their eggs and young are even more sensitive to things like pollution and habitat disruption than adult amphibians are. While the roads leading to Yellowstone are only used by about 4 million people each year, a newly erupted Yellowstone could see many more visitors, which means more cars and more pollution. Many of the lakes and streams that amphibians depend on for their life cycle could be negatively impacted by this pollution. And yet, when humans are no longer around to maintain these areas, nature has a funny way of taking back what's hers. Amphibians were around long before humans and could likely bounce back after an eruption. Even more, they could teach us something important about the effects of pollution. Bison are large mammals, and as such, they're somewhat resilient. If their habitat is destroyed, they could simply migrate elsewhere. However, during their migration, they could still face dangers. Humans might kill them because they're destroying property or getting in the way of cleanup efforts. And even if they make it through, they could starve because their food sources will likely be decimated. Bison eat almost exclusively on grasses, which will be covered in ash and pumice. When bison do eventually return to Yellowstone, they'll likely face food shortages. These shortages could lead to a population decline, but bison could still rebound because there are already a lot of them in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. There are roughly 25,000 in Yellowstone and another 30,000 in surrounding areas. Grizzlies are less resilient than bison because there are fewer of them overall. There are only an estimated 700 to 900 grizzlies in the lower 48 states, with about half of those in and around Yellowstone. And unfortunately for them, they've been at war with humans for a very long time. Before European colonizers came along, grizzly bear populations were reduced by trapping and hunting. After they arrived, grizzlies lost even more habitat to development and agriculture. Today, fewer than 24 grizzlies remain in the contiguous United States outside of Yellowstone, and without human interference, their population would likely continue to dwindle. But if Yellowstone erupts, the bears might actually get a bit of a reprieve. After the eruption, humans may focus on other areas initially, giving grizzlies a break and perhaps a chance to rebuild their population. However, if they do move back into Yellowstone, food will be scarce. Grizzlies typically need lots of berries, roots, and nuts, which may not grow back right away. Instead, the landscape will likely be covered in grasses and small plants that don't provide the same nutrition. If the grizzlies can't find enough food, they might head elsewhere, leaving Yellowstone once again. Elk are large mammals like bison, so they'll likely fare better than smaller or less numerous species. Like bison, elk could simply travel elsewhere during the eruption. However, like bison, they could also face dangers along the way. And like bison, they could also starve if their preferred food sources aren't available. Elk are browsers, meaning they prefer to eat woody plants like shrubs and small trees. These plants will likely be wiped out by the eruption, forcing elk to search for alternative food sources. Still, if the eruption doesn't wipe out too many elk, they should bounce back fairly quickly. Their population size and habitat outside of Yellowstone help ensure this. There are tens of thousands of elk in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, and their preferred habitat can be found throughout the region. Overall, the eruption will likely cause some species to go extinct, while others, like the ones we looked at today, may flourish. If Yellowstone does erupt, the animals affected by the eruption will face many hardships, but they also stand to gain new habitats and resources. By studying them, we can learn more about how to protect our own species and ecosystems from the effects of super-eruptions and the climate crisis. And speaking of learning more, so how will you spend your summer vacation? Watch a bunch of videos. Ha, that sounds like fun. And you can do it anywhere, anytime with CuriosityStream. Their non-fiction video streaming service has thousands of fantastic titles to choose from, including documentaries, non-fiction series, and more. You can watch on your TV or on the go on your phone or tablet. CuriosityStream has something for everyone, and if you sign up at the link below, you'll get 26 off the annual plan. That's less than $15 per year for unlimited streaming. With CuriosityStream, you can binge documentaries like Frozen Planet 2, which takes you on an epic journey across Earth's frozen landscapes and seas to discover the animals that call them home. Or watch something more light-hearted, like The Secret Life of the Zoo, which follows the day-to-day activities of staff and animals at a zoo. With so much to choose from, you'll never run out of great shows to watch.